Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today, and thanks for having me. My name is Lori Peterson, and I am with Diagnostic Learning Services, and we do all of the testing for learning disabilities for the Adventist schools across the state of Texas. So what I kind of want to talk about today are just some of the main learning disabilities that you guys are going to come across. I'm going to talk a little bit about what it looks like in the classroom, so that then you know if this is a student who would make a good referral to go through the program and eventually get some testing done. So some of the things we're going to talk about today, we're going to talk a little bit about dyslexia. We're going to talk about dysgraphia. We're going to talk about ADHD. And then we're going to talk about different kinds of math learning disabilities and dyscalculia, which you can say it like 3 different ways, but dyscalculia is how I say it. Not sure it's right, but that's how I say it. And then some other reading and writing issues that you guys might run across or see come back on a report. So the first thing I want to just talk about is dyslexia. And this is a general definition of dyslexia. But what I really want to tell you is what dyslexia isn't. And dyslexia is not about B&D reversals. I don't know who started that rumor. It was a long time ago, but it stuck. And we get calls all the time about my student is reversing their B's and D's. That is absolutely developmentally appropriate through the end of 2nd grade. So if you've got a 1st grader or a 2nd grader who's got their B and D's reversed, totally normal. If we get later on past that, we're going to talk about in a little bit what that really means. But dyslexia at its root is an inability to decode a word or to encode a word, to spell a word. So they get to a word and they look at all the letters and they cannot for the life of them put those sounds with the letters and blend them together to make a word. So you're going to see kids who are struggling with word recognition, struggling with decoding, and struggling with spelling. Spelling's kind of the big one where you see it. These are kids that at a very early age had a hard time learning the alphabet. They had a hard time learning the sounds that go along with the letters in the alphabet. And then by the time they get into 1st and 2nd grade, they are struggling to blend words together. And you'll notice these are the kids that are memorizing. They're memorizing their spelling lists. They're memorizing the pictures and words in a book, but giving them something new, even with those same words, and they don't have it. They're also the kids that when they're reading and you give them a word and it's 2 lines down again, they look at it like they've never seen it before. So really dyslexia is all about the ability to decode and encode words. What we recommend is, and here are some of the characteristics that I just kind of talked about. And so we teach phonics, or you teach phonics, in really kindergarten, 1st and 2nd grade. That's when the bulk of phonics is taught. And that's where kids are learning how to read. And then 3rd grade, now we're reading to learn. So what happens is a kiddo that has dyslexia, their brain does not process the traditional way we teach phonics. And so you may as well be teaching it in French. They are not getting it. What ends up happening is they go through a dyslexia program. So there are several of them. Take Flight is probably the most popular in our area because it was developed by Scottish Rite Hospital over in Dallas. There's a program called MTA, and I can't for the life remember what that stands for. There is Linda Mood Bell has a program. But what it does is these programs are scientifically designed to speak to a dyslexic brain. So it's very multisensory and it's done in a very systematic way. And when a student who has dyslexia goes into one of these programs, it's like this huge light bulb goes off and it's like, finally, someone's speaking my language. So they go through one of these programs. They're usually about 2 years-ish, depending on how the pace that they work and how quickly they pick stuff up. And at the end of that program, they have acquired all the tools they need to decode a word, to spell a word. They've just acquired them a different way. So all that phonics. So by making that student come back every day into your reading class in 1st or 2nd grade, it's exhausting for them because they don't get it. Their brain is not processing it the way that everybody else's is. And it's really frustrating. And so you'll see those kids. Those are the kids that are probably checking out or not paying attention or just struggling and expressing frustration. And I don't know, do you guys do any kind of dyslexia intervention, or do you have somebody that comes to the campus to do any kind of dyslexia intervention? So that's something to think about too, is that there are private, they're called academic language therapists, are the teachers who have gone through all the training to be a dyslexia therapist. And a lot of them will do private practice. They see kids privately. And so you could actually have one that comes to the school, and the parents can pay them. But they could come and actually pull these kids during their reading time and let them do the dyslexia program instead of sitting through the reading class. In a public school, that's really typically what happens, is that kids in first or second grade get pulled out of their reading and spend that time every day with a dyslexia therapist. And really those programs are meant to be done at minimum 3 times a week because of the repetition and the way they're designed for those skills to really stick and for it to be effective. And that means even over the summer too. So it might be something to kind of think about as a school, and that's probably the one service I feel like the parents can get that outside of school, but it's an after school and it's every day, and it's a student who's sitting in the reading class right now and it's kind of useless for them. So if you could use that time to help get them through that program and fill some of those gaps, you would see success happen a lot faster. Any questions about dyslexia? I know I just kind of purged all that on you. Marinate. We'll do questions at the end too. So let's talk about dysgraphia. So dysgraphia is really, it's difficulty with handwriting. Kids with dysgraphia tend to have really poor fine motor skills. And I will often ask parents, do they have trouble buttoning their shirts? Are they very good at coloring? Can they cut on the line? Usually the answer to all those is no. So they have some weaknesses in their fine motor. And it makes their handwriting very hard to read. Now, if these kids go super slow, you can read their work. But realistically, you can't go super slow because then you'll never get it done. So they go at a pretty average rate, but then it becomes very difficult to read. When we are looking at kids that have dysgraphia, we're looking at things like how they shape their letters and the sizes of their letters. So in one word, are the letters, even if they're all lowercase, are they all different sizes? Is their lowercase a bigger than their lowercase f? Just looking at those kinds of things. We're looking at the spaces that they leave between each letter as well as each word. Is everything crammed together? Do they have poor spatial planning? Or is it all spaced out where it just goes across the page? Do they get to the end of the line and just put one letter of the word and then go to the next line because they didn't realize they ran out of room and they haven't learned how to divide words yet. The letter number reversals beyond that developmentally appropriate stage. So if you have a 4th grader who still has a couple letter reversals, that's more typical with dysgraphia. While they sound alike, they're not actually really related, dyslexia and dysgraphia. They say they're both language-based learning disabilities, and that's kind of where it ends. The state of Texas in their dyslexia handbook has now decided to include dysgraphia, which is awesome because it gives parents more information and resources. But really, other than that, they're not very similar. You'll see them that they have trouble holding their pencil. We got kids that will do like the funny grips, or they can't get comfortable with it. Yeah, they just can't get comfortable with their pencil. They may push really hard or write really light, and they'll complain that their hand hurts. You'll see them doing this all the time. And then they're just slow. They're slow at writing. If you've got something on the board and they're trying to copy it, it takes forever. So when something is hard, you don't want to do it, right? So if writing is hard for a student, if the physical act of writing is hard, guess what's going to happen? You're going to get a low volume of output. They may have great ideas and have an amazing vocabulary, but to get it on paper is so painful that they'll find the shortest way to say it with the fewest number of words and the fewest number of letters in those words. And you'll think, wow, that's all they had? I really thought they knew more about this. Well, they do. They just really struggle to tell you about it. And so there are some really easy ways to accommodate these kids in your classroom. So easy. First of all, giving them copies of anything that you present on the board. If you can give them a hard copy, really before you start to discuss it, that way they've got it in front of them and they can circle and they can highlight and maybe make a note or two. But if you've got something on the board, math, anything, and you can give them a copy of that's huge help. Allowing them to only give one-word answers. If it's a test or a quiz or an assignment where you want complete sentences, but really the goal of the assignment is just do they understand the content, then let them use short answers. Let them use 1 or 2 words. Don't make them write the complete sentence because it may then, that process of writing may interfere with their ability to show you what they can do or what they know. There are some really great apps, and I don't know what technology you guys are using in the classrooms, but on the iPad, there are 2 apps that we recommend all the time. One of them is called SnapType, SNAPTYPE. And that app allows the kids to, if you give them a worksheet to do, they can take a picture of it on their iPad and then type in the answers, and then they can print it back out with their answers on it. And it was developed by a mom who has a child with dysgraphia. The other app is a math app. It's called Mod Math, M-O-D, Math. And this app, as you know, when you get into 3rd and 4th grade and you're having to do long division and long multiplication, lining your numbers up is super important. Well, for a dysgraphic kid, it's very hard. And so they may have all of their numbers correct, but they've shifted over or didn't shift over where they needed to, and now the final answer's wrong. So Mod Math is just an app where they can put in all their numbers. So they put the problem in, and they put all their numbers in. There's no calculator. It doesn't give them the answer, but it's just a way to keep their work organized. The other trick that I didn't think of this, so I won't take credit for it, but I never thought of it, is to take a regular sheet of lined paper, turn it sideways, and let them do their math that way. And that way they've got the columns right there. A lot of people will say use graph paper, but for kids with dysgraphia, writing in those little boxes can be frustrating. It's just as frustrating. But using those columns to help them keep their work lined up can be super easy and helpful. Any questions about dysgraphia while we're talking about it? Okay, ADHD. We could spend all day talking about ADHD. And if you think about some of the stuff we've already talked about, ADHD, kids are inattentive for lots of reasons. If somebody doesn't understand something, chances are pretty good they're just not going to pay attention. If you stuck me in a Latin class right now, I can promise you I'd be on my phone in 3 minutes. I'd be playing around. I'd be playing Candy Crush because this makes no sense to me. I don't get it. And that's what's happening in class now. They're not hopefully playing Candy Crush, but they are just checking out. They're thinking about something else. They're frustrated. But then you have kids that truly just can't pay attention. And when we talk about ADHD, we talk about 3 types. Now, we no longer have ADD. Now, it's still there. I mean, people still have it. But the diagnostic manual, where we get all of our diagnoses from, has done away with ADD. And what they've done is they've called everybody who has any kind of attention issues ADHD, and then they qualify it as either being primarily hyperactive, primarily inattentive, or maybe a little bit of both. And so sometimes parents don't like that if they have an inattentive kid and they get the H in there and they are like, well, we don't have the H. And I said, you're right. That's why you're primarily inattentive. But ADHD, your hyperactive kids, those are easy. Those are easy, especially at this age, because they are a mess. They are falling out of their chair. They are talking to their neighbors. They are blurting out answers before you've even finished your question. They have to go to the bathroom 500 times because they just need to get up and move around. They're playing with stuff in their desk. Their desk is a mess. Their area is a mess. They can't find anything. They are, you know them. You all have them or have had them in your class. They stand out. They're easy, okay? The inattentive ones, you can't tell that they're inattentive all the time because these are the kids that are looking right at you. You are teaching something and they are staring right at you and you feel like, I got this. They're with me, a million miles away. So they're the ones that when you say, okay, I want you to get out your books and turn to page 17 and we're going to do problems 1 through 10, and they look like deer in the headlights. Like, what are we supposed to do? Because you just gave them 3 steps and they have no idea what those were. And you've just brought them back. So those are the ones I think that are the hardest to catch because they look like they're paying attention. And if they're a well-behaved student that from all what you can tell they're trying, you're not going to think twice about it. But really, they're not paying attention at all. And then you have a little bit of both. And I will be honest with you, I think the little bit of both are the kids that have the hyperactivity that gets so much in the way that they can't pay attention. Because you have hyperactive kids that are making A's. They are killing it. They're driving you crazy, but they're making great grades. When they get their work done and when you can read it, they know. They're listening. They're listening even better if they're moving. But the ones that aren't, the ones that are a little bit hyper but still aren't getting it, those are your combined kids. Those are the ones that have a little bit of both. And I think that the hyperactivity can sometimes get in the way of their ability to pay attention. So how do you deal with these kids in your class? Because you have them, whether they're labeled or not, you have them. And some of them may be taking medication because that's really the most effective way to treat it. ADHD at its root is a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's a lack of neurotransmitters that help people focus. And so when something is interesting to you, it stimulates you. If you enjoy something, if you do something that you're good at or that you really enjoy, that chemical in your brain gets stimulated and you can focus. And that is why kids with attention deficit can play video games all day long. Or they can read books if that's what they love to do. Or whatever it is, they can play a sport and they're amazing at it. They can be focused because they love it, they enjoy it. The minute it becomes something that's hard or something they just don't like, they're out, they're done. And that's what confuses parents the most. And that's probably like the B&D reversals with dyslexia, with ADHD, we hear the most, he can play his video games all day long. He can do puzzles, he can play with Legos for hours, he can build. That stimulates him, he loves it. But give him a book to read? Nope. And the way kids express that frustration is very different. Some kids will cry and throw a fit and throw a temper tantrum. Some will just not do it. Some will just look defiant. And so parents don't know, is this something that they can't do or they won't do? And it's frustrating. But in the classroom, I think the message I want to share about ADHD, and I again did not make this up, if they could, they would. And I think that's the most important thing for you to understand. None of these three types are doing anything on purpose. If they could do what you wanted them to do, they would do it. These are not kids that are lazy. These are not kids that are defiant. They're not just choosing not to do the work. They can't because they either forgot or they didn't hear you or they yelled out the answer and now they're in trouble. They didn't do it on purpose. And so I feel like that to me is the most important thing to understand, is that when I talk about ADHD and managing and disciplining kids with attention issues, grace is the word that comes to mind, because these kids aren't doing it on purpose. And when you punish a child for yelling out an answer or for always talking to their friend, you're not teaching them anything, because guess what? They didn't do it on purpose to begin with. So they're not going to remember the next time, oh yeah, I got in trouble for that, I shouldn't do it again, which is what you expect to happen, right? Because any neurotypical kiddo, that's the process. For kids with ADHD, it doesn't stick. And it is so frustrating because you're like, oh my gosh, how many more things can I take away? How many more times can I take away, recess or send work home and you a million times, because they're not doing it on purpose. And that's what you have to understand. And I think working with that child and saying, look, I know sometimes it's hard for you. What if we set you over here? What if talk to them and let them know you get that what they're going through is hard, even if they haven't been diagnosed yet. If they're yelling out answers, that's probably it. But get with the student and say, how can we work together? Some students like to be set aside and be by themselves where there are fewer distractions. They know they can't work when a lot of other things are going on. So they may say, I'd really rather sit over here by myself. And the first place you always want to put these kids is right in front of you, when really that's the worst place for them, because now they're distracting everybody else. So sometimes these kids are better in the back of the room where they can stand up and you tell them, you know what? We're going to put a couple pieces of tape on the floor, and now you have this whole area. And if you need to get up and move around, just this area, you're good. If you need to lay things on the floor because you can't organize your space, this is your area. And allow them that freedom, that space, so that they can then move around. Some of these kids, again, once they start moving around, they can pay attention. Putting some Velcro underneath their desk where they can kind of play with it and sensory feel it. You might have somebody that then can be laser focused if they've got something. I struggle with all the fidget spinners and all the toys because they're just toys that distract other kids then. Well, how come he gets one and I don't? So keeping it more subtle, like something under the desk. If in your classroom you have the opportunity to have everybody or have 3 or 4 kids or exercise balls in your room that kids can sit on, that's a great way for them. Yes, they're going to move, but it engages their core and it gives them some sensory stuff, so it gives them something to do so that they can get their work done. We could go on all day about ADHD. I have one of these at my house, so I live with this all the time. Yeah?
I just had a quick question about people is also their ADHD, but I noticed that they're...
We want it recorded that you won't hear this.
Okay. I just noticed that they can be like almost mean to other people, but when they're on their medication, totally different. When they don't take medication, I can tell immediately because they're nitpicky on their brother or nitpicky on somebody. Or is that...
That's so normal. Their level of patience is about that much when they're not taking their medicine, right? So they have zero patience for it. So the minute something happens that they're not happy about or they don't like or they think is stupid or whatever, they fly off the handle. And that is one. So when we talk about executive functioning skills, emotional regulation is one of those executive functioning skills that's impacted by attention. So the inability to manage your emotions. The other thing I hear a lot too is that students who don't take medicine will come home from school and completely fall apart. Like beat up their little brother, yell at mom, cry, moody. And really that's because they have spent the last 8+ hours holding it together and trying so hard to be good and trying to sit still. And they may not be successful, but they're trying. And they get home and it just is like they unleash on everybody. And that is so typical. So medication does help kind of give them a filter. It helps give them a little bit of time and space as far as their patients go. So you don't see as much of those behaviors on the medication. Is very typical. The other thing I talk to parents a lot about too is it's okay. You want to talk to your student, your child about this. They need to know kind of, and depending on their age, it depends on how deep you go into it, but they need to understand they're not stupid. There's nothing wrong with them. Their brain is just wired differently. That's all it is. And sometimes it's harder for them to pay attention. Doesn't mean you don't have to do it. It means you're going to have to try a little harder. And talking to them about some strategies of things they can do. So what should you do if the teacher gives directions and you didn't hear it? I should raise my hand and ask. I should go talk to the teacher after everyone starts working. Giving them some strategies because some of those kids will just sit and do nothing. And that just frustrates everybody, right? So helping them understand too, what are some of their options as far as asking for help and knowing how to manage, and understanding that, sometimes you get impatient and sometimes making them aware of it. I have a lot of kids that will come back and say, I just found out that I have this, but I've noticed just this week, I've noticed me do, because they don't even notice those things are happening and they can already start to be a little bit more self-aware and manage it a little bit better. So, any other questions? Yeah.
Is there a certain age where you would start testing for it? I have preschoolers and I'm always very hesitant because they're just now learning how to be in school and sitting down in those certain characteristics. And, you can compare students. Well, they're a little bit different than other students, but every student is different at the same time.
Absolutely. And developmentally, you know what to expect, right? What these kids should be doing and should know how to do. I think when they've been exposed to something structured like school on a regular basis. So we say age 6 is what is my typical response for that. But I will tell you, I'm learning more and more as I do what I do. And they are starting to make diagnoses much younger. Probably 4 would be the youngest. Younger than that, I don't know how you could do it. I was, down in Houston a couple weeks ago, and we do a preschool assessment thing down there for this organization, and I tested 25 4-year-olds. Yeah, I had 2. I know it. I know it. What do you do about it though? Do you want to medicate your 4-year-old? I don't know. It depends how bad it is, I guess. I will tell you, my personal experience with medication with my son, and then what I've shared with other families and what I've kind of heard in return is that the younger you can intervene, the more likely you are to see less effects of it later on. So, for example, my son, when he was 4, I knew it, right? He was crazy. And so we got through preschool, we got into kindergarten, we started medication when he was 6 and a couple months. And we did medication for 3 years. We didn't take it in the summer. That's a great thing about the stimulant medications. You don't have to take them in the summer, or you don't have to take them every day. Not that procrastinating is not a bad habit, but he didn't have a chance to develop a lot of really bad habits because we kind of nipped it. And so I feel like now he has that point of reference. Like I know what it feels like. It's harder to get there, but he can do it. And so I try to encourage parents because I get a lot of parents that will say, I just want to wait. I want to wait. I'm like, okay, but you're giving them more time to develop those bad habits. And honestly, medication really just helps kids focus and pay attention and manage their impulses. It gives them a filter. It will not teach them how to be organized. It will not teach them how to plan for a project. It's not going to teach them how to manage their time. We as teachers and parents still have to do that. But if you've got somebody who's focused, now they can listen to you and they can put what you recommend and you suggest into practice. Whereas somebody who's not focused, I mean, good luck, right? It's not going to happen. So medication definitely has a lot of benefits. And there are so many different kinds now, mostly stimulant, but there's some really great non-stimulants if parents just aren't comfortable with the stimulant medication. But it can be a game changer. It can be an absolute game changer for a child, especially for their self-esteem, because think about what happens when you're constantly getting in trouble all the time. Well, your self-esteem takes a hit. So what happens when they get to middle school and they've spent their entire kindergarten through fifth grade, sixth grade, always being reprimanded for their behavior or not getting work turned in or failing tests because they didn't study or they thought they studied, but they didn't. Well, now they have terrible self-esteem. Some of these kids are experiencing some anxiety and some are depressed because they're constantly telling themselves, I'm so stupid. Why did I do that? Why did you, and what do they say when you ask them why they did it? I don't know, because they don't. But they beat themselves up over it. And so now we've got a whole other set of issues we have to deal with going into middle school and high school if we just would have addressed it here. Any other questions? I don't know what our next slide is. So here are all my struggles. We just went through all of these. This is available. If you guys want me to email this to you, just email me and I'll send it right back to you and you can have all this information. And then anything else you need. Okay, so let's jump to math. Now, I will tell you, interestingly enough, that most of the kids that we see that have math struggles have math gaps. And a lot of those kids are attention kids because math is so cyclical. It builds on itself. The stuff you're learning in kindergarten, pre-K, kindergarten, first grade, you need those skills to be able to do 6th, 7th, 8th grade math, 5th and 4th grade math. And so if you aren't paying attention and you're only getting about 50% of what's being taught, you're going to have gaps. And your math is going to suffer. Reading doesn't suffer the same way math does. Reading doesn't, it's retaught and kids pick it up and they can go with it. Math, those gaps are there and they can't recover. So a lot of the kids that we see that are struggling in math have attention issues, but not all of them. Some of them truly have a math disability. So when we talk about dyscalculia, which is a type of math learning disability, we talk about kids who struggle to understand place value. They don't know how to work the number line. Positive and negative numbers make zero sense, and carrying and borrowing, well, if you don't understand place value, then carrying and borrowing, you won't get. Word problems blow their mind. And it's that language of math. Like, they just want to take the numbers and just add them because they can't figure out what the problem's asking them to do. They struggle to sequence numbers, but also events. Fractions are such a big one. Fractions are, if you don't understand fractions at their most basic concept, then you don't understand why you have to have common denominators to add fractions. I used to teach math. And that was the one thing, like, if you don't understand what a fraction is at its most basic form, then multiplying and dividing them and all that, you're just going through the motions, but you're not really understanding it. Making change and handling money. We don't do enough of that now anyway, because we're all using debit cards and nobody really carries cash anymore. And so making change is becoming a lost art, but it's so important. I always tell my kids when we're testing and they use calculators, especially the high school kids, I'm like, but don't you want to be able to know without getting out your phone to find out how much to tip when you're on a date and you want to leave a tip? Wouldn't it be better to be able to do it in your head and not have to get your phone out? Like, that's embarrassing. Don't you want to just look good and like, I got this? And they all are like, roll their eyes at me, but nobody can figure out what, 15% of anything is. Recognizing patterns when adding, subtracting, multiplying, or dividing, putting language to math processes, and then concepts related to time, how long something's going to take, what we did yesterday, what's tomorrow. Those time concepts to them don't mean anything. And so these are the kids that just really need to be retaught in a different way. So the way that it was taught the first time, it didn't stick. Let's try something different. Let's try a more multi-sensory, something that's got more manipulatives, something where they can get actively involved in the process. They're more likely to understand it when that happens. It's a lot like the reading with the dyslexia and the multi-sensory. Same thing with the math. So we've got dyscalculia, which is really just a math disability. And then we have just some really bad math gaps very often. So other reading and writing, and this is really small because I tried to squeeze a lot in, but things that we see are kids that struggle with reading comprehension. So they read it, they read beautifully. They have absolutely no idea what they just read. They don't understand it. Sometimes that can be a language-based issue, like they struggle with language. They struggle understanding how to answer questions like why. Because it's not explicitly stated in the text, I don't know. Those higher level comprehension skills. They also may not be paying attention. This one comes up attention kind of plays a part in everything because you can read a whole page and be thinking about 7 other things. And I think we all do that occasionally when we're busy and we've got a lot going on and we're like, wait, what did that say? Well, kids do it all the time. They'll sit and they'll read something and think, I got this because I read it. Well, did you? Can you tell me what it said? No. And then writing, being able to organize your thoughts on paper. So you may have beautiful handwriting, but if you can't figure out how to get your thoughts from here to here, that's a problem. And so that's where we talk a lot about helping kids with graphic organizers, helping them make outlines about what they want to write, make notes, dictating what they have in their head to like a voice-to-text software and letting it type for them while they just kind of purge all those ideas. Then they can go back and work on organizing. But they don't know where to start. They have all these great ideas. They have absolutely no idea how to put it on paper. So this kind of takes a small part in my presentation, but it's actually one of the most common things we see. And you're going to get kids that are going to come back here with our testing. And I bet you at least there's 5 of them in the school right now that have a visual processing disorder. Now, this is not about acuity. This has absolutely nothing to do with how clearly they see. They may see everything crystal clear, but the words are moving around on the page. That's the most common one. Or they don't see the spaces between their words because of the way the light refracts, and I don't have all the science behind it. I can't explain it to you from like a doctor's point of view, but I can tell you what we see. We see kids who read very disfluently because their eyes are jumping all over the page. So if you give them something to follow, and sometimes just a finger isn't enough because guess what? There's still all this stuff above that they're getting lost in. So sometimes you need to cover above and below. And if they can read that line when you cover it, but when you take it away, they can't, that's a big sign of a visual processing. Their eyes are not tracking across the page straight. One may be going one way, one may be going another way. They may not be working together. It could be a host of things with the way they track. Spelling. They may be able to read, but they can't spell because guess what? Spelling's a visual task. You spell a word and say, that doesn't look right. You never say it doesn't sound right. Because kids and these are the kids who might spell a word, but the letters are out of order. All the right letters are there, but they're in the wrong order because they know what letters go, but they can't remember what it's supposed to look like, that visual recognition. Or they spell very phonetically. Everything's spelled phonetically. That's like the opposite of dyslexia, right? Because dyslexia is not understanding how to spell phonetically. These kids spell everything phonetically because they can't remember what the word's supposed to look like. They can't write on the line. So my dysgraphic kids, when we do a dysgraphia evaluation, we always include some visual processing evaluation too, because not being able to see the spaces, not being able to stay on the line, words that float up off the line and kind of float through air. Those are kids who are struggling to see the space. I had a girl come in, she was in 3rd grade, and we don't have too many kids that come in that have already had this diagnosed, but we get them. And she had on, they kind of look like sunglasses, but they were much lighter than that. And she told me that when she took those glasses off, she couldn't see any of the spaces between the words. Everything just crams together. But the minute she puts them on, it all loosens up and she can then see the spaces. So fascinating. They'll have headaches. They'll rub their eyes. They hold things real close. They'll do all of these, they try to accommodate themselves. Sometimes they'll ignore the signs in math. Okay. Or they'll have trouble lining up their work again because of spatial stuff. And then if they read something silently, they can't remember it because all of their effort went into reading every word on that line or every word on that page. And so they're working so hard to physically read, they can't remember what it is they just read. Super frustrating. And here's the thing is they don't know what they don't know, right? They don't know the words are moving around on the page and that's not happened to all the rest of us. They just assume they must not be smart enough to figure it out. And their self-esteem is really being crushed because of the fact that they can't do this and everyone else can. And why can't I do this? They have no idea. I had a dad call me, it's been probably a year, and his son had been in, he was a middle schooler, and his son had been in, and we found that he had a terrible visual processing problem, and they prescribed a different kind of lens. They used prism lenses and some different things. And he called me and said, I want you to know that he told me that after he'd been reading with his new glasses for a while, he's like, Dad, I didn't know that all the words weren't supposed to have lines through them. You know, again, unless you could crawl in their head and see what they're seeing, they don't know that it's wrong or different. And so if I have a child that comes in and they're in second grade, first grade, even third grade, and they already have glasses, I think, you know, that's really young to already have some acuity issues. And it happens, but it always makes me wonder because they'll go to the doctor and they can't do the vision test very well because they can't see whatever it is that's being presented to them correctly. And so they end up getting diagnosed as having nearsighted, farsighted, whatever, when really it's this. And so I have doctors in Fort Worth. I have one in Plano. I have one in Southlake that do specifically, if you just go for your regular eye exam, they're not looking at any of this kind of stuff. They're not looking at your visual processing. They're only looking at your acuity. So I have a couple doctors that are specifically trained in this. And I mean, it is a game changer for a lot of these kids. There's also vision therapy that they do where they do different exercises and it strengthens some of those weaker muscles in the eyes that are causing some of their struggles. Any questions about any of that? I talk really fast. And that's the end. That's all I got. Those are the big ones. Any general questions or anything I can answer, student related or otherwise? Oh, hang on to get the microphone.
I was just wondering if you had someone that was like in fourth grade and they flipped numbers, you know, like the 6s and the 9s. What would you be thinking that would be?
So I think that's either what's their handwriting look like?
Yeah.
Average. And their reading fluency is pretty good and spelling is good?
I'm pretty sure they have dyslexia, but I didn't know if it might be something else because you said the flipping, doesn't
So
really.
that leads me to think it could be some of the visual stuff. And we have a lot of kids that will come to us after they've already been diagnosed with dyslexia. They've gone through an entire dyslexia program. They haven't made any progress. It's one of two things, attention or visual processing. And so it could be that, and sometimes it wasn't ever dyslexia to begin with, but because they had some of the same, they look a lot alike, they just go with dyslexia. So it might be visual processing. Is it consistent?
Pretty consistent.
Does she catch it or he? Do they catch it or do they not even see it? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would definitely say probably some visual processing stuff. Back here.
So if a student, I teach second grade, and I have a student that has glasses, and I do notice that his eyes kind of go up and down as we read and stuff. What can I suggest then to parents as far as what to do?
And is he pretty disfluent reader?
Yeah, and handwriting is also all over the place, struggles quite a bit with spelling, and we just gotten through the first couple months of school, so now we're really seeing what's consistent, and that's consistent behavior now. So now I'm kind of wondering the next steps.
You're welcome to give them my information. I'm happy to talk to them and see if they'd be interested in going to one of these doctors just to get. To me, it's why wouldn't you just rule it out? Just go let them look at them and just see if that's what it is. It kind of sounds like that's what it is. And I have parents that call all the time because they think they want testing. And when I talk to them, I'm like, look, go do this first, because this is where I'm going to end up sending you, and everything you're describing like that sounds like it's more visual processing. So go, let's rule that out first, because if that's the issue, we can fix it. Now, I say I obviously can't do anything. They can fix it. And then you may not need anything after that, but it's only going to get worse and harder the more they have to read and write. So I would definitely do something about it now. It is so common. Anybody else? No? Oh.
I have a kindergartner several kindergartners that can't decide which hand to use, and they trade off, and neither handwriting is good, and they're just starting out, but writing their name is really hard. But how do you encourage, or what do you do to encourage one or the other?
I think, do you notice that they typically go with one and then switch, or they just start with one or the other?
either. They can start off with one and then go to the other.
I would probably encourage them to have one day where they only use one hand and see how it goes. And I would also work on tracing instead of just free writing their name. See if they could trace the letters of their name and see if that makes it any easier. I'd also have them go to do you have a whiteboard in your room? Have them go to the whiteboard and see which they'd pick up if they were going to write their name really big. So sometimes that fine motor is where the issue is. And so if they're able to write it really big, where do they go? What's their choice? And I would do that a couple times and just keep notes about which way they're going. Because if they're tending to go more, right-handed, that's probably what you need to encourage anyway. But I think using the bigger body movements will help you figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
We have a third grader that has constant headaches, and so it sounds like he might have the visual processing disorder. Is that something that the parent can contact you and they can go over that? And
absolutely. Do you see any of those other symptoms?
Yeah, and he has glasses, and it sounds like that's probably what it is, because he's always needing, he has headaches or...
Well, sometimes they'll get those glasses, and that makes it worse, because then the headaches, So absolutely, yeah.
Well, and his dad had headaches, he said, growing up all the time too, and had glasses. So I don't know, is it a genetic thing?
It can be, yes. Okay. I had a conference with a son and a dad just not that long ago, who, as we were talking, the dad was just like, I can't believe you're describing me. And they were actually going to go together to get their eyes checked.
Okay.
Because he had always just thought that he couldn't read, like he just wasn't good at it.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for having me.